One result of the drought of 2024 may be the need to reseed pasture or perhaps perennial grass hayfields. During the second session of the Ohio Virtual Beef School on February 26, 2025, Noble County OSU Extension educator Christine Gelley reviewed selection criteria when considering which grass forage species to include in new seedings. Here's that portion of Gelley's presentation.
Here are some recommendations if you're considering reseeding perennial grasses. All of these can be implemented in a beef cattle production system. They all have strengths, weaknesses, but all can be really productive and pretty high quality value for your livestock. A couple cautions here as we look at these recommendations, or I'll just kind of give you a rundown of these species as we go. Kentucky bluegrass is quite productive. It's not a high yielder, but it's very persistent to close grazing. So if you have a tendency to overgraze, or the animals that you're managing have that tendency, Kentucky bluegrass tends to be pretty persistent under those conditions. Orchard grass does not tolerate close grazing, overgrazing. You need to really give at least 3 inches of residual when you're done grazing orchard grass. Same goes for when you're making hay on it too. So it's a little bit more picky, but great productivity, great forage value as far as quality goes, nutritionally for the livestock. Perennial ryegrass, we have some challenges with perennial rye in the southern half of Ohio. If you're north of I-70, it tends to be persistent for a long time. If you're south of I-70, we tend to have some persistence issues where once the heat of the summer kicks in, if we get some chronic dryness, perennial rye tends to work its way out of the system and the other grasses tend to move in and take over. So depending on where you are, you may have great success with perennial rye, or you may find that you're adding that back into the stand every 3 to 5 years to keep it vibrant. Reed canary grass is one that we sometimes have caution with because it is considered an invasive species. However, it does have value for livestock feed. It's great in areas that are chronically flooded. So if you have scenarios where you're in the floodplain, much of my county flat ground is floodplain. So reed canary grass may be an option for getting good productivity out of an area that's difficult to get into when soil moisture is high. Produces a lot of yield. If you can get to it before it's over mature, it can be worth harvesting. Um, so that may be an option for a special case scenario. Smooth brome grass, pretty good quality, pretty good persistence. Often it's not going to be the most prominent one you see in the system, but certainly can be complementary in a mix. Tall fescue, we've got that love-hate relationship with tall fescue. Kentucky 31 is going to be the variety that's naturalized in our space. Kentucky 31 thrives because it has that endophytic fungus that lives inside and helps it get through stress. That endophytic fungus has anti-animal quality factors. It can create vascular constriction in the livestock if it's grazed at high amounts. The way to get around that, if you're doing a reseeding, is to consider a novel endophyte tall fescue, not Kentucky 31. Novel endophyte tall fescue means that it has an endophytic fungus. It has that endophyte in it. However, it does not cause the vascular constriction issues that Kentucky 31 can do. So you still get that stress resilience from the plant without the concerns for the livestock. Endophyte free is available on the market. That seed is treated to kill the endophyte before it's seeded. The way the endophyte passes from one generation to the next is through seed. Um, so you can interrupt that scenario with an endophyte free variety. However, it tends to have lower persistence because that endophyte aids the persistence. So if you're considering tall fescue, I still think it plays a great role in cattle production systems. It has its place if we're diligent about management, but if you're going to take the time to plant it on purpose, I encourage you to pick an improved variety beyond Kentucky 31. And then we have Timothy. A lot of producers like Timothy. It tends to come on earlier in the season than it tends to mature later um, than some of the other grasses that are here in the mix. Um, and it produces a really palatable grass, but often it has some persistence issues too. But you could take any of these perennial grasses here, mix them together, and come up with a really productive um, forage stand, whether you're grazing or making hay. As far as legumes go, um, there's a wide variety of those as well. Most commonly for perennials, we're going to look at red clover, white clover, alfalfa. Um, we may consider bird's foot trefoil. We may consider some annual clovers. Jason's going to talk about annuals later on. Um, Readily available, pretty affordable seed. But again, I would just consider evaluating your weed scenario before you go all in on a spring planting incorporating legumes, just in case you've got to employ some herbicide usage that would otherwise deter from your investment.